So we're going to write the equations, and that equation in slope-intercept form is y equals mx plus b. So last week they gave you the equation. This week we're going to actually write our own. So linear equations can be written from a table of values that represent a linear relationship. First, determine the constant rate of change or the slope, okay? Remember, that's your m in that equation. That's your slope, or your change in y over the change in x. Okay, then determine the y-intercept, which is your b in that equation. Do y'all remember what y-intercept means? What is that? On a graph, what does it mean?
What
does it mean?
It means it's either negative or positive.
It's going to be negative or positive, but what else is the y-intercept? What is that?
Oh, it's where your line starts.
Where your line starts, where it crosses the y-axis, right? Where it intercepts the y-axis. Or the value of y when x is 0. So we haven't looked at tables. We've just looked at graphs. So the y-intercept on a graph is where it crosses the y-axis. Okay? But if we've got a table, my pen stopped working. Axis. But if we're looking at a table, it's going to be the value of y when x is 0. And that's already written down there. I'm just kind of rewriting it. And then you'll write the equation in slope-intercept form, the y equals mx plus b that we wrote down up here. And linear equations can also be written from a graph by choosing any 2 points to determine the slopes. So let's look at this first table. So example 1, if they give you a table and they say write the equation of the line that is best represented by the table. Just remember the equation they want should look like this. Y equals mx plus b. So step 1, determine the rate of change, and they've kind of helped you out here. Your change in y.
2 minus 2 plus x over y.
Good. And my change in x. So they figured that out by saying 4 minus negative 2, 0 minus negative 2. That gave them 6 over 2. So that's your slope. But can we make that smaller?
Divide.
We can divide it, reduce it. So 6 divided by 2, or reduced down, is 3 over 1. Or 3. So then if you have a table and you have to find the y-intercept, so we need our b for that equation. We've got the m. Now we need the b to plug in that equation. That's going to be your y value. So one of these guys. When your x value is 0. So on that table, do you see where your x value is 0? Right here, the second number? So what's your corresponding y value? Okay, so that's your y-intercept. So when we put that all together, the equation of the line in slope-intercept form is y equals 3x plus 4. You're just plugging those numbers in. 3 is our m, 4 is our b. Okay, so now if we were given a graph and it says write an equation in slope-intercept form for the line. So an equation should look like this, y equals mx plus b. We have to figure out the m and we have to figure out the b before we can plug it in there. So just like when you graphed it, you want to find your starting point. So where that line crosses your y-axis, where does your line cross the y-axis on this graph? Carlos, what do you think?
Negative 4.
1, 2, 3, 4. Good. Negative 4. So my line crosses the y-axis at negative 4, so that's my b, that's my y-intercept, negative 4. Okay, so from there, I need to make at least one more point so I can figure out the slope. And have we talked about how to find a good point if they don't give you? Okay, it'll have one. If there's a slope, it'll have one. So you want to find good points that go right in the middle of the intersections. So then from there, you can find your rise over your run. Just look from point to point. So these bottom two, my rise, my change in y, my vertical change, I went up 2. My horizontal change, my x, 1. So 2 over 1 is your slope. Or just 2. So then we can plug that into our equation. So y equals 2x minus 4. So we want to write an equation. Y equals mx plus b is what we want the format to be. We got to find our m and we got to find our b. Okay, so first of all, let's figure out what our slope is. Maybe if I can change my color. So figure out your change in y over your change in x. So 9 minus negative 11 is my change in y. You're finding your change in y. So 9 minus negative 11. Change in x, 0 minus negative 5. Do y'all understand what we're doing?
No. Race car.
Guys, you're just finding the change in y. So listen, this is the same thing you've been doing. So your change in y is your difference. 9 minus negative 11, 29 minus 9, 49 minus 29. That's your change in y.
You put 9 plus.
It's
Minus, okay, hold on. I put 9 minus negative 11. What happens to minus negatives?
Oh,
They
it
add.
becomes negative.
They cancel each other out, so then you're adding them. Same thing down here. So 20 over 5. If I did the second pair of points, 29 minus 9 over 5 minus 0. 20 over 5. This is slope. This is what we've been doing for about a week. So your change in y. So our slope is 20 over 5. That's my change in y over my change in x. Can I reduce that down?
Yes.
So what's 20 divided by 5?
4.
4. So my slope, my m is 4. Then your y-intercept. So that's your y value whenever x is 0. Do we see that on the table?
Is the b going to be 1?
No way.
On your table, where is x value of 0? Do you see that? It's our second number. What's the y value when x is 0?
9.
That's your y-intercept.
Oh yeah.
Shut up.
So plug it into your equation. Y equals 4x plus 9. That's all you got to do. Find your slope, then find your y-intercept, whatever your value is when x is 0.
That's easy. A little bit.
So we want to write an equation. We want y equals mx plus b. First of all, let's find our slope, and then we'll find our y-intercept. So our slope, change in y over change in x. So to find that change in y, I'm going to subtract those because that's the change. Negative 7 minus negative 1. What is that going to be?
It's going to be 8. Negative 8.
Negative 7 minus negative 1. Negative 6. Thank you.
Why?
Okay, negative 7 minus negative 1. What happens to those minus negative? They cancel out, so you're adding it. Negative 7 plus 1 is negative 6. Then your x value, 0 minus negative 2.
That is 2.
Positive 2. Okay? So my change in y is negative 6. My change in x is positive 2. So what does that reduce down to be? Negative, good. Negative 3. So that's my m. That's my slope. Then your y-intercept. That's your y value when x is 0 on your table. So do you see where x is 0 on the table?
Will it always be like that on a normal table?
So what is your y value when x is 0?
-7.
-7. So when we plug it all in, y equals -3x minus 7. So we got -7. Okay, last one. If we're given a graph, we're going to do the same thing. We want y equals mx plus b. We want to find our m, and we want to find our b, so we can plug those.
3x -7. I mean -7.
Yes, the last one was -3x minus 7. So then when they give you a graph, remember the easiest thing to find first is your y-intercept. So where does your line cross the y-axis?
1.
On 1, +1. So bam, I've already got my b. Done. +1. Next thing I want to do is find another good point. I'm going to put a point right here because that goes all through the center, like through the intersection there. Does that make sense?
No.
Okay, so when we're finding another point,
How did you get 1?
It would be negative.
because that's where your line crosses the y-axis.
It would
This
be
is the
negative
y-axis, this is your line.
Equals -3.
Okay, so then we want to make another point. And so I want a point that's going to go through the intersection, like at a 4-way stop. Going to go through the crosshair. So I'm going to make a point right there. And I could probably make one right here, but 2 points is good enough for me. Okay, what do you notice about this line, first of all, before you figure out the slope? Is it positive or negative? Negative. So whatever I figure out my slope to be, it's going to be negative. Okay? Now find your vertical change over your horizontal change.
1 and 3.
Your vertical change. So from point to point, I'm going to go down 1, 2, 3. So my horizontal change from point to point, I went down vertically 3 notches, 3 squares.
Is it -3?
Yes, because my slope is negative. And then my horizontal change is 1. So negative 3 over 1 is my slope.
1 and 3.
And a lot of the times your graph might be numbered. In this case, it's not. So it's just going by once. But, so not always can you count your squares. Sometimes it'll be numbered and it'll be going by 2s or 5s or whatever. In this case, it's not numbered, so we're just going to say 1, 2, 3 over 1. So when we plug all of that together, y equals -3x plus 1. So those 2 steps, find your slope, find your y-intercept. Remember m or slope, rise over run, y over x, vertical change over horizontal change, and your b is your y-intercept, where your line crosses y-axis, y value when x is 0. Okay?